So defining a variable is very simple. Variables take the form of a $sign and then a word or phrase, whatever they are. It has to start with a letter, but you can put numbers in it after that. I recommend starting each variable definition with a letter that says what kind of variable it is here. It's a habit that I picked up here at Mouse Media that has been very helpful. In the case of a block of text, it's called a string, so I recommend starting with an S. So in this case, pick on Travis since you just walked in.
Are there any like generally accepted variable names, like agreed upon? What like I know like we'll always use S for string or we'll always.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
And as far as I've seen all over the place, there are ways that are kind of common, but there is no like standard way of doing it officially. This is called camel case, where you start in lowercase and then you have some uppercase letters to break it up. There's the hump in the middle. This is probably the most common way of doing it. A lot of places will have something like this. Other places will just have just a word. There's no official way of doing it. I recommend coming up with your own style of what's comfortable for you. Like I said, I have found putting a single letter in there. So if it's string, if it's an N for number, if it's an A for an array, something like that, put in the letter as the beginning of the variable. And it
So you
just
don't
helps
have to actually define it there? You don't have to define that it's an array or define that?
Well, in the process, it depends. In the process of creating it, in the process of defining it to begin with, what you define it as, if I were to say S name equals 1, that's going to be a number. I've called it S name, but it's not actually a string. It's actually a number in this case.
Right.
PHP will know what it is regardless of what you call it.
Right, but is it in a good form to define it or no?
Yes and no. It depends on what you're doing with it. Okay. And I'll get into that in a bit. There's a few cases where it'll break, like trying to loop through an array, but without defining the array is going to break your script. But that's one of the very rare kinds that will do that, and I'll get into what it means to do all of that. As far as this goes, we have S name equals Travis, so I can do echo S name, and what that's going to do is just print Travis to the screen. That's going to return that as HTML. If I were doing this without defining S name, and I said echo S name, and it didn't exist yet, it would just be blank. It's not going to break. It's just echoing a blank string at that point. Any questions so far? If I, and please keep interrupting us slash like. If we have two strings, and let's say we want to put them together, it's called concatenating. You use a dot to do that.
What was that word?
Concatenate. I'll spell it out here. Yes, there's all kinds of fancy words. That's how you put first name and last name together, or you put two strings together, you put a dot, and suddenly they become one string, saved as whatever it is that you've said it's equal to. So in this case, I've created a new variable. However, I am missing one thing in here. Can anybody tell what it is?
Space.
Exactly. I need a space in the middle. In this case, I'm mixing defined variables that I already have and brand new strings that are not saved as any variable. I'm just typing them right in mine.
You have to have the dot between the two.
Because that's like 3 variables right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just like HTML, PHP doesn't, it doesn't like view like multiple spaces. Like it would just see it as one space, right?
Mm-hmm. So I can put in as many spaces as I want to here in PHP. We'll treat it as part of the string, but once I put this to HTML, it's just going to break that down into one single space. And it doesn't care. I can put in blank lines in here, and it's still treating it as one variable until it hits that semicolon. It's treating it all as one instruction. Another thing I can do in here, in this case, I've taken this and I've saved it as S name, but I don't have to. I can just do that right in line and ignore the definition of S name. And here I'm putting multiple strings together using dots to concatenate them together.
Would you have to ignore it? Like, would that throw it off to have that variable in there that's not being used?
No. It depends. If you're going to use S name somewhere else in your script, you're going to want to define it if you're going to use it multiple times. If you know this is the only place you're ever going to want to put them together, don't bother to define another variable. It's just extra work. But technically, it works either way. But this is what I was saying, that's the loose thing about PHP. You don't have to define something in order to call it. You can just put it in line, and it's very loose about how it interprets this stuff. And you can space things out more if you want to. So if it's easier for you to read it like that, spaced out, that's fine, go ahead. It'll parse all of that correctly. Other questions? No? All right. Strings are the most basic kind of variable. You use them all the time. Strings are just blocks of text, and they can be very short. They can be 0 characters long, which is just a blank string. They can be unlimited length. Pretty much the memory limit of your server is how much you can store in a single string. You can put War and Peace in there if you want to. But that's the most common kind, and that's the kind that you work with most, because ultimately that's what you're echoing to the screen. That's the ultimate purpose of any PHP script, is to send something to the user. And so you'll be using this the most often. Another one that you'll use a lot are numbers, which we use for math functions. So let's say time right now is 8:23. So we have 8:23 here. These are defined as numbers, so I can actually do math on these.
You don't need to quotes around them?
Nope. If I were to put quotes around them, it would just treat them as a string with 2, 3, or 8 as the value of the string, but it wouldn't know the numerical value of that.
Right.
And so I can start doing math on this. I can say sum equals an hour plus n minute if I want to, and that's going to give me 31. Is the value of n sum. You can do subtraction, you can do multiplication with a star, you can do division with a slash, you can do other math functions. I'll get into greater than and less than don't really matter yet until you're doing things like if then statements, like if this value is greater than this value, then do something. But you can technically type that.
What would you need to use math for?
It depends on what kind of script you're writing. If you're writing anything that requires computation, like how many days left until so-and-so, you can see what the current server clock is, and you can tell what date that is, and then subtract them.
Or
If
shopping cart or something like that?
Shopping cart, you need to process dollar amounts, that sort of thing. So it's useful. Just like in algebra, you can type complicated things. If we wanted to know twice that amount, we could say an hour plus n minute times 2. We need to enclose that within parentheses and then do another one on top of that. For whatever reason you can. It's all very smart about how it handles this, and again, if you want to space this out further to make it easier to read, go ahead.
Just like math class.
Yep. You always, when you were a kid and you were in math class, you always thought, when am I ever going to use this stuff? As a programmer, you do wind up using this stuff quite a bit. As long as you remember the functions, but you don't have to do the math yourself. The script does it. You just have to remember how to spell out the formula, and then you've got it. With numbers, as I said, with strings, every string, if it exists, is equal to 1. If you try to compute it in math. So if we were to type that, n minute is now actually a string, and so if I were to add this, it would be 9, 8 plus the value of 1. Because it either exists or it doesn't. A string it either exists and it's equal to 1, or it doesn't exist and it's equal to 0.
So 8 times dog, or 8 plus dog is 1, or 9?
Exactly. It's kind of weird thinking of it that way, but that's the only time you're ever going to encounter this, is if you have the wrong type. If you've defined it as a string and you're trying to compute based on it, you're wondering why it doesn't add up. That's why. So just make sure whenever you're defining your integers, always do, that.
Does it always have to be an integer, a whole number?
No, it can be fraction. As far as decimal point, it can't really handle fractions very well.
So that'd be important though, if you were just defining like a total, you'd want to make sure that all the pieces in there were numbers, not strings. And so.
If you have a string and you want to convert it, or let's say hour is a string at this point, and you want to convert that, you can use a function called intval, which will convert it to the integer value of that. So that will take the string 8 and it will realize, oh, there's a number in there, I'm going to convert it to 8. If you have letters in there, it can't do anything with it. It can't help you. No. That's all right.